right, welcome to One Man Band and our Masters of the Musiverse series. Today I'm speaking with composer Darryl Johnson II. This would be a two-part interview in which we discuss two of his works in depth, his composition experience project, the commissioning process, and a ton more. Before we begin, remember to hit subscribe and visit my Patreon page if you would like to help keep this venture going. Darryl, thank you so much for coming in.
Absolutely. Good to meet you.
So let's just talk about like what's your profession? When you have to tell somebody what you do, what do you do?
So the one line is I'm a composer, but specifically I'm a band and orchestra composer, and I work with high schools and middle schools around the country on my music, but also music composition issues in general.
Right. And we're connected because you have a project called the Composition Experience that, we were starting to work out the details of maybe having come visit us. I'd like to talk about that a little bit. What is the Composition Experience?
So the Compositions Experience is a program that I run where I do visit these schools, and I do them in clusters around the country. So generally I'm doing states, a third of the states each school year. And I go to schools in that region, and they're already working on my music. So we work through the piece, I conduct them, I talk to them about the inspiration, talk to them about the interpretation. We address key areas that need to be worked over, and then if we have time, depending on the situation, I also go into details about how the piece is composed, the process that it takes from the mind to the music stand, answer frequently asked questions that the students have about the music industry, about music composition, about one-band literature, about the life of a composer, about anything that they want to ask. So it kind of has that built-in show and tell aspect so that teachers can expose that last side of music education that is often difficult to address, because it's a simple way for teachers to have a live content creator in their classroom with their students to interact with without all of the hassle of planning it yourself.
How would somebody set up a visit with you? What's the best way to start the process?
So the simplest and cheapest way is just to do a soft sign up for when I'm in your area. And then at that point, it's a fraction of the price that it would normally be to do something like this. This particular school year, I think we're looking at $475 for the basic cheapest event, and then it can go up to $800 or $900 depending on what you want to do. Which, I don't know if you've ever tried to do it, but it's usually thousands of dollars, because that's a flat price. You don't have to worry about flights, hotels, any accommodations, food, rental cars. It covers the sheet music, it covers the postage, it covers taxes, it covers everything. And so it's actually a big savings on the general price of doing something like that. And that's what happens when it's on a regular tour. So for instance, that's the simple, easy way. But if you were wanting to participate in a year that was not one of the states that I was doing, then it's just a simple email, and the process is the same, but the price is different because I have to travel specifically to a specific area. And then that can be worked out on a case-by-case basis. But
I don't want to talk about the whole COVID thing too much because I'm just as sick of it as everyone else. But I'm reminded, I listened to a podcast. I actually pulled it up here. We've got a podcast in Minnesota called Band in Minnesota. And do you know, I think it's Kat Nishimura. And
yeah.
she talked about when this was in the podcast, when this all started happening, she actually couldn't compose. It was really a hard process for her. And I found that interesting because I thought maybe that would be a response coming from composers. And I suppose everyone's different. So what about you when this happened? Like how did it affect you and your composing?
That happened to me too. Like I pretty much just laid in bed, and because it was like I had all of this stuff going, all these teachers, I was going to meet all these students. We were planning ahead, emailing, and then totally decimated overnight almost. And in fact, I was in the middle of the tour when it happened, and it was just like fly home, and I was out of it. Like writing music was the furthest thing from me, and it definitely took over a month for me to get inspired to do anything like that again. And I hadn't realized that it could be connected to that. But I guess it was less what was happening and what was coming, and more a result of what had happened and that, the loss, and that, like, you know, if I hadn't had anything planned and this happened, then I would probably just written as normal. But it was just seeing everything, all the things you're excited about, all the people that you're looking forward to meeting, just having it all collapse. And it really zapped the creative energy for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Next thing is we're going to get into Frontier Rising,
Mhm.
a grade 4 piece of yours. Frontier Rising was commissioned by the Moses Lake High School bands and the surrounding community in Moses Lake, Washington, as a means of sharing the small town American story of expedition, settlement, and development. The piece is a journey of tenacity, resolve, and ingenuity that follows the sequence of rugged New World frontiers as they steadily develop into established modern communities.
So this particular piece, the director, Daniel Beach, who is the Moses Lakes band director, very, very conceptual, intuitive, clever kind of guy. And he wanted to do a piece that was specifically related to Moses Lake becoming what it is today, but that also paralleled with other American frontiers, because there's a common process that happened going back to Native American days, and then the settlers, and then everything that leads into the city as you see it today. And so all of that history is usually cemented over, you know, with modern affects. But he wanted the piece to outline that process. So, and I'm not going to play the whole thing, just give you a little bit of a demonstration of how it's constructed. So it opens with kind of a Native American scene, and it's simple music, very basic. And so that's going on there to set the scene of out in the open, you know, maybe the people making pots, maybe out sharpening arrows, stuff like that, getting ready for whatever that they do during that time. And that goes on until we get to the introduction of the European settlers. And so you can hear there it's complexifying. It represents the complexity of the two cultures coming together, but also the European style of music that would have been at the time coming out of Baroque, going to classical, definitely has a more European sound than what came before it. And so there's that music going on, and then over time we get to the conflict, and this is a little bit of the battle music, kind of like the plotting in the dark of night, and the increasing tensions between the different agendas. So one thing I try to do during this uh, piece that, you know, as a composer, you kind of run into the issue of you have instruments like the bassoon, like the oboe, like the bass sax, musicians that are not accustomed to receiving critical parts because of varying issues. And so I intentionally gave the Barry sax a solo of their own here that's supposed to come out. And then the bassoons have their moment. And then oboe. So for an ensemble that has strong players in those seats, those options are there to stretch those players and give them a chance to do something that they wouldn't normally get to do. But this edition will include alternative transpositions in case those instruments are not there or not able to manage that. So after the battles music comes the Columbia Basin Project, and here you can imagine cement being laid out and the builders building the dam. It's kind of open, not a lot going on because it's just a long foundation being built over hundreds and hundreds of acres. So that goes on, and then we mentioned the military base. So this is my John Philip Sousa-esque emulation or tribute, whatever you want to call it. And from there, we go into the tech boom. And so this is going to be very technological music. You can imagine factories and stuff being stabbed and all the machinery doing that sort of thing. And that's the melding of the history and the modern. And so that's a little snippet of Frontier Rising and what each of the sections represents and how it's constructed. Hope that's helpful to you. And if you're interested in it, let me know. I'd love to have schools playing that and to be able to incorporate the historical elements of whatever your town has gone through to end up where you are.
I love programmatic music. I'm probably not the only band director. I think we tend to steer in that direction. But I'm curious, as you're writing these themes, like, where do the ideas come from? Are you doing research to get inspired? Are you just being pictures? What do you do?
In the case of this one, so for the military thing, for instance, I was intentionally channeling John Philip Sousa. And so it's a modern version of what you would hear in one of his marches. For, say, the technological theme, when Dale moved in and they had some other tech industries going in, I kind of was thinking already, what sounds like technology? And so if you listen to that, it sounds like what you might hear in the 90s when you have those old processors and the guy talking with a gray suit on and the kind of grainy 90s footage. And it's pulled from a soundtrack that you might hear during one of those guys walking through the factory. This is where we have our Electron X3000. And mostly, you know the sound of things that you're looking for. And then just like a chef, like if you are used to cooking and then you see someone on TV cook something that you never cooked before, but you can recognize all the different steps that go into it, and you can generally recreate it by saying, oh, okay, he basically did, he blanched that, and then he folded that into there, and then did a blend, and then I was kind of like the souffle. So it's that sort of thing where I knew generally what those sort of things sounded like, and then I created my own version of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I've never thought about that. I think it's a skill that, composers have that maybe the average musician doesn't, because I can hear something and be like, oh yeah, that sounds like, this thing, but I don't know if I could recreate it, or it would probably take me a very long time to do it. So I've never thought about it in the analogy of a chef. So thank you for that. So you clearly have a passion for teaching composition because of this project you're into. And I think also, like, if anybody looks at the extensive notes that you put into your pieces, you care a lot about not just putting this music out there, but for people to understand it. So I'm just kind of curious if you can speak to why that's important to you.
There's two levels. There's the one level, which is that I am semi-control freakish about wanting to make sure that every angle is accounted for. If the teacher has a question, I want them to be able to look in the score and figure it out, or be able to read the program notes. And so I want to quixotically cover every angle, even though I know that it can't be done. And I'm just a thorough, detailed person by nature. Now, secondarily, because of what I do, I've worked with hundreds of teachers, and whenever I have a chance, I always ask them, what are you looking for in music? What do you think is missing? What helps you as a teacher? And when they give me that feedback, I write it down, and I do my very best to keep all of my music academically fruitful and to make sure that it lines up with the things that teachers need when they are teaching. And I know that certain teachers like to try and do form and analysis when they can with their students to help them think about the full piece. So by including an analysis section, it enables them to photocopy that, give it to the students, and get the students thinking about form and analysis. By putting the key centers in or the melodies, helps the students to understand who they should be listening for, where the focus is, and to see the piece beyond their individual part. With the program notes can be extensive. Sometimes if I want them to know, for instance, in this piece, everything that's happening, because there is a full piece of imagery going on there. Or sometimes I just want it to be open to interpretation, and then I'll just write a sentence.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I really appreciate it. I love when I open up a score and I see like the two sentences and then the music. I'm like, oh, great. But then when I open up and I see pages of information, for me, I'm just like, yes, like this is stuff that I can latch onto as I'm preparing the piece and as I prepare my students with the piece. So I do appreciate it. The last thing I'll say here about Frontier Rising, and you can add anything else you want to, is I just want to mention to everyone, it's a grade 4, 8-minute piece, pretty standard scoring. I think there's 7 percussion parts. Is that right?
There may be 8, but I can't remember. I think there may be 8. Because
So
the 3 and 4 share staff.
oh sure, yeah. So yeah, like I said, do you have anything else you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned the progression, so I do provide directions about what can be omitted if need be. But I think we pretty much covered the nature of the piece. It's a American historical narrative about frontiers becoming cities, and it's got a lot of different sections. So you can teach a lot of different styles, a lot of different musical directions from that one piece. I think there's like 7 different parts of it. So
Yeah.
that's about it.
I don't know if we want to go too much more into the percussion stuff, but I will tell you again, something I appreciate is when composers kind of notate that these percussion parts, like you could get by without this one, or you can have 2 people play this one part, or one person play these 2 parts. I like those notes, but I also like when they're not in the kids' part. You know what I mean? Like
your part is not important.
I can't imagine like a percussionist, everyone's like, I got snare drum, I got optional bells.
Yeah, I have done that once, but I try not to, because you don't want to have, you are disposable. It's right at the top of the page, but yeah, I get what you're saying there.
Yeah. All right. So flex band music is a big topic right now. I don't know if you're part of like that Facebook Creative Repertoire Initiative. If you're not, you definitely should go check it out. It's interesting. So I'm just kind of curious, do you have any flex band music that you're working on?
I do not, and I do not intend to pursue that, at least not extensively. Maybe I will create one piece, but what I'm going to roll out for this upcoming school year is an opportunity for a direct connection where if a teacher is interested in one of my pieces, then I'll have a custom arrangement option where for some amount of money under $300, I will arrange that piece specifically for your ensemble. So it won't be flex, but it will be custom. And at this time, I'm more interested in that direction than going the custom route, because I know that ultimately the custom music is less gratifying for teachers, and when this is all over, I'm not sure how interested teachers will be. Now, I could be wrong. This is I'm spitballing, but
Yeah.
my focus is going to be more toward the custom end of things, more so than the general flexing of arrangements.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And so, just to kind of reiterate that with everyone, get a hold of Darryl if you like one of his pieces, but your ensembles this year are going to look different because of the situation we're in. And he'll customize one of his pieces for you. So, yeah, the flex stuff is interesting to me. I've only done like one or two in my career, and maybe I'm not gonna say what they were because I didn't in the end didn't really enjoy them. Didn't really ever feel like I got the right mix of instruments playing the right parts. It will be interesting to see though if that form is maybe elevated because of so many people working on it. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. Maybe would be a good word.
That's pretty exactly why I'm not going into it, because I know, like, I think if you have an instrumentation where it's necessary, then it's definitely better than not having it. But if you're at all close to something else, it just gives it that sort of B flat scale sound after a while, because you can't really orchestrate in that context.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that our medium offers is that color. I think of the different combinations that composers use to create color, and they do that with the instruments they're pairing up, and now you kind of like it's like we're taking that tool away from you. So good luck.
Yeah, one of the advantages of going towards a customized direction is part of what I take into is like maybe you have an oboe, but you actually have a really good oboe, or maybe you have like several trumpets, but it's kind of your weakest section this year. All that stuff can be factored into something more customized, so that you have a piece that fits like a suit rather than like a J.C. Penney medium, and that's what I think is if you're looking for something that is of a competitive quality, I think it's a better direction to look for something made for your ensemble. I mean, again, you do what you got to do. You play the cards you're dealt,
Yeah.
and so many people custom a flex thing will be the best option, but they'll have both options.
So what are you working on right now?
So I'm working on a piece called Immutable that is dedicated to the California fires that happened a couple of years ago, the record-breaking fires, and it deals with the whole scenario and process and recovery from that. I've got a couple marches and then uh, some orchestra stuff for band and orchestra combined, which is a popular request that I get from a lot of teachers who have strings and winds that want to play together. And then also a few high school things. Now, for jazz band, I'm continuing on that catalog. And if you're a jazz band director who is interested in out of the box jazz kind of stuff, that's mainly what I focused on. I almost deliberately avoid trying to sound like Count Basie or Duke Ellington or Sammy Nesco, because they've got that down packed. They do a wonderful job at Superior, and I will never match that. So my jazz band stuff is off center, offbeat, kind of unusual, and could be an interesting way to add a curveball to your set list for your jazz band.
All right. So commissioning with you, how do how does someone start that process?
So if you're on a tour that I'm doing already, it's an option that's built into the package where you can just upgrade and then do a commission. And then we can include the students along the way, however much or little you might like to. And it can be directed or not. And Frontier Rising, which we talked about, there was very clear direction about what they wanted. But some other pieces, the teachers just give me blank check. It's whatever. Sometimes the students will write in, they'll request different things for their instrument or concept that they're interested in. It's a very simple process. Really, it can be wrapped up in 5 minutes. And so I have a one sheet every year with all of the information for that year. Look at it. If funding's not an issue, we are pretty much good to go really quickly. And then it's just a matter of, what we're going to do. So, send me an email. We nail it down. Good to go. It's not a complicated issue.
How far out are you planning right now?
Well, due to the coronavirus, I'm taking on a lot more because there's a lot more time. So I have maybe 4 commissions set for 2020, 2021. But I I don't put a limit. No, usually people don't contact me and say, I want to do something for 2032. Like it's usually something that's intended to be done in the next 2 years. And, for this upcoming school year, I could probably take another couple. And then for the following school year, I only have like one or two sets. So that's not a problem either. So uh, I guess the short answer is I have increased capabilities at the moment.
When you're writing a piece that is specific, like it has to be like Frontier Rising, how do you get the inspiration to write when you're kind of pigeonholed?
It actually isn't bad. Like I think Stravinsky said that there's nothing worse than the blank canvas. And in a sense, that can be true that having a direction doesn't necessarily make it harder. So I knew that I was doing X, Y, Z. And so I just plugged it in that way. Inspiration, if you're made to do something, and this is something that students ask a lot, I don't think that it's generally too difficult to come up with inspiration. Now, I do get writer's block from time to time, but it's rare, and I have a couple solutions for dealing with that. Uh, the first solution is to study someone else's work and then uh, take some element of theirs and make it something that I want to do. And what I mean by that is there may be an orchestrational tactic that they use. I'm like, that's a very interesting idea. So I'll use that tactic to do something totally different. Maybe a form that they use, maybe a texture, maybe a harmony. I'll take those ideas and then develop something just based on that one isolated technique. Secondarily, I have several folders of music. I have my trusty iPhone, which when I'm out and about, sometimes I'll have an idea come to me. I'll have 100 ideas in there. I have what I call the junkyard, which is a folder of things that I started and just fell apart, couldn't make it work, toss it over to the junkyard. But many times years later, including the case of Frontier Rising, I'll listen to a snippet and I'll be like, that's it. And so I'll pull that snippet out, and maybe it didn't make sense in 2006, but it works well in 2018, and I kind of get where it's going. And then I just off to the races. So Frontier Rising is one that really came pretty quickly. I was able to finish the sketch in like 2 days, which for me, being a slower writer, that was very, very fast. And those are ways that I deal with it. But just like you as a teacher, I'm sure that you, even during the summer, are thinking about maybe I can try a different way to get the clarinets over the break. Maybe this is a way I can teach syncopation in a specific way. We were talking about electric guitar, jazz guitar. Like you're inspired to come up, how can I learn this instrument and how can I help others learn to teach this instrument? I never had the idea of how can I get teachers to understand electric guitar, because that's not really what I'm made to do, I wouldn't say. But when you are made to write music, stuff just comes to you, and it's probably not a problem. I think if you're constantly writer's blocking, it's an indication that whatever you're doing is not quite in your bag. Like you're maybe close to what you're supposed to do, but you're probably a little off, and then something else is really what you're looking at.
Anything else about commissions you'd like to add?
If commissioning is something that you've been interested in doing, something that you have a passion for, this is a great time to keep the repertoire alive, because this is a terrible storm for creators. And so I'm not saying to say commission me, any composer that you know of, if it's something that you have the ability and interest in doing, this is a time that would really mean a lot to the wind band world or the orchestral world to commission a piece, because I think this is going to be a purging season and a lot of people will fall off this ride. And that's one way that you can keep music moving forward, one way that you can keep people creating, and one way that you can truly make a difference in the community that we're in.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a great place for us to leave this conversation too. So thank you for those words.
Sure.
All right. Well, that's it for part one of our conversation with Darryl Johnson. In part two, we're going to talk about his piece, A Game of Chance, that has some improvisation aspects to it. And then we're going to go through several of his pieces in a very overlook, synopsis view of some of his pieces, just to get some stuff out there. So join us for part two coming up here pretty soon.